All right, this week in Exercise Science Lab, we've been talking a lot about levers within the body. And while each body part and joint has some sort of machine or lever system, we talk more about, I think more practically about the entire body and where levers are found. And one of the best examples of that involves your bar placement. All right, so I'm just gonna do a quick example of what we talked about in lab as a review with the PVC pipe. If I'm gonna do a barbell squat, I got a couple options. One is to do a front barbell squat. Now this is tough to do with the PVC pipe. We're not gonna hold the bar like this, but for the sake of not dropping it, all right, if I'm in this position here, I'm gonna be a very upright position, right? And as I squat, if I wanna keep the barbell, which is my line of force, right, acting with gravity to push straight down, the barbell, the PVC pipe is gonna be over my midfoot. So as I squat down over my midfoot and stand back up, we see that the center, or the lever from that line of force out to my hips and knees is going to be about even, all right? We kind of see this depending on your form and your ankle mobility. You might have a little bit longer lever arm towards your hips or towards your knees, and a front squat, it's gonna be more knee dominant. So keep that in mind, that a front squat will be a little more knee dominant. Maybe if a client or patient walks in with their back bothering them and you don't want them to hinge as much, this might be a good option. A goblet squat with a dumbbell, or just working on form. All right, then we got into a high bar position. If you're an Olympic lifter, a high bar lifter, there might be a time and a place for this. This is what I did for a long time, is a high bar squat, which is gonna sit on top of my upper back, the spines of my scapula for the most part. All right, we're not gonna get into three positions. Well, I guess we can. The spine of my scapula is a pretty high bar position. This is gonna be the next position where I'm gonna bring in a little bit more hips versus the front squat, but not much. So as I squat, keeping the bar over my midfoot, I'm gonna be hinging a little bit more, but still using my knees. The next position, which I think is probably most universally favored, is just below the spine of my scapula there. Keeping my elbows tucked in, the barbell held tight, right? So I'm locked into a pretty good position there. So I believe this would be the Mark Ripto starting strength model. This is pretty popular here. So I'm gonna be about that mid-bar position, just below the spine of my scapula, the bump that goes across your scapula, hips, feet a little wider than hip width, toes point out maybe 20, 30 degrees, and then go into that same squat, keeping the bar over my midfoot. And then we talk about the low bar position. Nick was in class today. He actually demonstrated this. I'm way down now here, wherever I can get to. Now we talked about the problems with this is that some people just don't have the shoulder mobility. All right, the bicep tendons, their anterior capsule, the rotator cuff may not like this position, but this is gonna put the most stress, which isn't a bad thing when we say stress, on the lower back and glutes. So I'm gonna be bent over quite a bit more to keep the bar over my midfoot and come back up, all right? That's probably the closest thing to a powerlifting move. I'm using my lower back, I'm using my hips quite a bit. So we saw that sagittal view with the diagrams and the lever arms, the force arms coming away from that line of force, which dictates how much force we're putting on the knees versus the hips, all right? But that was a quick demonstration to remind you of that. So the lower the bar, the more posterior chain, the more hips I'm gonna use. Now, if someone's having a hard time, this is exercise number 2 for this video, if someone's having a hard time getting back on their hips, if an older person you're working with calls a squat a knee bend, that probably means their pattern or their sequence of loading is a little bit off, right? Well, let me demonstrate a box squat. One of the first things I'll do with all of my clients is just see, can you sit down to a chair and stand back up? Okay. Now, what I want to see them do is can they do that without their arms? So I'm going to put their arms in what we call genie position. Right? So genie squat is going to look like this, and I just want to see how well do they sit down and then stand back up. And if they do that well, I might see can they just touch and go, and can they control that motion going down? All right. And by doing that genie squat position, it brings their chest upright. Can they keep their spine tight without falling into that lordotic curve, or that kyphotic curve, and stand there. And then I will progress appropriately. So to regress that might be bring the bench up a couple of notches. To progress it, and I ask about progressions mostly, is maybe the box, we lower the box to 12 inches. Maybe we add a little bit of weight. Maybe we put a dowel, a PVC pipe, a barbell on their shoulders, or we ask them to do like a single leg squat. So just different variations for progressing that squat. Now, I have somebody who just cannot get back on their butt, right? They can't get back, meaning on their hip. Their sequence, their load sequence is more knees. They bend their knees. What I have them do is do a wall drill. just to stand up against the wall. And the more claustrophobic someone feels here, the more it's a sign that they're probably leaning forward a lot, and that's where they're sensing their stability. If they go back under their hips, that's bad news. So if someone gets up and says, oh, I just don't like this, I feel like I'm going to lose my balance, that tells you right there that they're really relying on their vision, they're relying on their knees, they're relying on their front hips, right? That they don't get back. When I tell them wear your hips over your heels, they should be kind of back and comfortable. So I can walk up and just feel totally comfortable standing here because I'm balanced, right? And then the question is, can you squat down? And what we're looking at is, can you get back on your hips, right? So this is a little excessive because it's okay for your knees to go over your toes, but it's a nice test to just see, even if they're a foot away from the wall, can they stay upright? If they want to, about a genie squat position, bring their elbows down and then back up. Can they get a little closer and go down and touch the floor? And just to work on getting back away and getting and activating, engaging, if you will, their posterior chain. So the goal, if you're trying this at home, and I'll try this now, I haven't done this in a bit, is my big toe is against the wall. I'm in my socks. I'm going to squat down. Keep my head straight ahead. You can't look left or right. And then back up. All right? So it's tough. I haven't done that in a while. I felt that, my diaphragm, my thoracic spine. So a lot of muscles are working there, but that's a good drill to work on just to see how you're doing your squat, notably in the sagittal plane. So 3 things there is the lever arms or force arms, the moment arms we talked about within the back squat, depending on where your weight is. Are you holding dumbbells in front? Is your barbell in a high bar position, a low bar position? And then doing that initial client assessment if you're working on your squats, how well do you stand from a chair and get back up? The progressions with that, and then trying this wall squat. The last one I did mention in the lab was another one I like to do. If they're really claustrophobic, like they're just not comfortable facing the wall, I'll have them stand here away from the wall. They're more comfortable with that. But what I want them to do is touch their hips back to the wall as they go back. All right? And that's just, it's a little bit more of a security thing because if they fall back, they just hit the wall. But it allows them to kind of get back, touch, and back up. So that's a nice drill for just seeing, are they getting back into a good position, back onto their hips, and then driving through their hips. Your hips are your primary movers. It's all about your hips. So if you're doing a step back, a lunge, a squat, your hips are doing the movement. Your knees are very important, but they're just following through. They're secondary to your powerful hips. All right? Keep those things in mind. Work on your squats always. And I'll see you next time.